So welcome everybody. This is the second virtual Time for a Pint get together. I'm Chris. I'm the guy that you've probably heard on podcasts, or you've met me if you've come to Time for a Pint get togethers. In the window next to me, on my screen at least, is Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hi. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi. You're over there. No, you're over there.
I'm here. There. I don't know where I am.
There.
I'm there. I'm all over the place. So you saw me and Matt last week trying this out. We turned it around really quickly in less than a day, and no one died and nothing caught fire, which I think is progress for us. So we thought we'd do another one, and we're going to kind of keep these going while we're all locked up and unable to hang out together and enjoy watches in the pub. So this is taking Time for a Pint back onto the internet, which is the exact opposite of what it was meant for. But hey, you know, I can't fix pubs at the moment. So we have...
I'm to say it's the exact opposite.
Has everybody frightened, or is it just me? Oh,
it's just you, I think.
Oh.
Don't worry. I
Okay.
can read from the script.
What script? So we should probably introduce our guests. So Matt, would you like to introduce Kathleen? Or Kathleen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Matt can introduce.
Kathleen, you can do it.
Too.
Are we just going to be really polite for the next 45 minutes? This is going to go
So much about scripts, huh?
I'm really pleased to have Kathleen on actually as our third guest. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Kathleen McGivney.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know me, I am the CEO of Redbar, which is an international kind of global community of watch collectors, not dissimilar to the folks that attend Time for a Pint. In fact, I think there's a lot of overlap in folks that attend the London the Redbar meets and Time for a Pint. And yeah, I'm in New York City. I'm staying inside. So yeah, nice to meet you all.
Good to see you. And I've invited along Balázs. Hello. You've been on the podcast. People have heard your voice before. Some have met you before.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about you.
Yeah. So I'm a podcast alumni. I think number 18 was my podcast back in the day, many years ago. So I'm an editor for Fratello Watches. I've been an editor for Fratello Watches since 2014, so 6 years now. And I've been obviously some of your get-togethers. We kind of organized some dinners back in the day with Fratello and other friends of ours when Solon QP was still alive and well, which sadly is not at the moment, or I hope they will, but that's the news that I heard. And I live in Germany, and I'm in solitary confinement since 3 weeks now, forthcoming tomorrow. So yeah, staying inside.
Yeah, it's the answer, right? Just stay indoors.
What can you
Don't
do?
go out.
Yeah.
So following on some feedback last week where we tried holding up watches to the camera and you get kind of this sort of effect and it doesn't really work. We decided to take some good quality pictures in advance, and I've gone old school and put them into a PowerPoint slide deck. So the way we're going to do things today is each person has brought a watch along, but they sent me pictures in advance. We're going to talk through the pictures. The person whose watch it is gets to explain what it is, why they love it, what it does, where it came from. We as a panel get to ask questions if we have any. You folks at home can ask through the chat, and we will be keeping an eye on that. And as we go, you'll be able to ask us things. Once you've gone through all the 4 watches, we're going to throw stuff out to you folks at home in the chat, and you can ask us anything and everything. I've already got a couple of pre-submitted questions from people. We're going to run this about 45 minutes, and then when we're done, we're going to let you go. There'll be a recording. If you miss anything, it'll go up on YouTube. And yeah, that's how we're going to do this. Any questions from the panel, or are we okay?
I think
we did a run through, so we should be okay.
All good.
Okay, so first up, I'm going to get this presentation going, and we'll see what happens. See if my computer entirely falls over. So let's see what happens. So here we go. So can everybody see that slide deck?
Yes.
Yeah, success. Technology at work. So Kathleen, this is your watch first. So you're in charge. You get to tell me when to click through.
Okay, you can go to the next one,
okay.
Photo of it.
Okay.
So this is my this is the watch I have on, which you can't see because tiny webcam. This is the Arnold Son HM Perpetual Moon, which I love for a number of reasons. One is the moon phase is my favorite complication. There's absolutely no need for it whatsoever in modern life, for me to know what phase of the moon it is. So it's kind of a, it's kind of a romantic complication. It's also a little bit of an astronomically kind of nerdy complication. So that's, anybody that knows me knows, weird and nerdy is kind of my wheelhouse. So I love this piece from the moment I saw it. We did an event with Arnold Son, and they had it, and I was just fascinated by how detailed they made the moon, and how just beautifully simple it is. It's just highlighting this one complication, and that's it. It's just hours and minutes otherwise, and it's just really stunningly built. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is a close-up macro shot by Adam Moore, who many of you know as really quite great at macro photography. But this is just the level of detail and finishing in this piece is just stunning to me. The moon phase is so detailed. You can see there's kind of a guilloche dial with enamel on it. This piece actually is a piece unique. They do make a production, or they did make a production version of this with in steel and blue dial. But when they first came out with it, they only made the steel version in black, and then they made the blue dial in I believe it was rose gold. And I prefer steel. I don't have a lot of gold watches. It's just wears better, in my opinion, for me, for my lifestyle. So I asked them if they would make me a blue dial one, and they said yes, which was great. It took a year because they weren't producing the dials in this way in the blue. So they were hand enameling it, and they didn't like the way that it came out the first several times. So I finally got it, and I'm just in love with it. And then the next slide, the next photo, it shows the movement. So there's a couple of things about this piece that's really great. First of all, you can see the movement is beautifully finished. There's some Côte de Genève finishing on it. There's some hand chamfering on the bridges. But what I think is most interesting about this movement, well, there's two things that are really interesting. One, if you keep it wound, it stays accurate to within 1 day's deviation, the moon phase, every 122 years. So pretty incredible accuracy for this watch. It's manually wound. As you can see, there's no, you can see that it's manual wound. But the thing that's really interesting is if you look at the bottom kind of right, or bottom left, is the phases of the moon. So it's kind of a quick set moon phase. So if you don't wind it all the time, it is at the opposite, end of its phase when you pick it up. There's a pusher on the upper left, just about, like a little bit above the crown, that you can press, and it moves that little subdial in the back. And so you basically just press it to get it as close to the phase of the moon that it currently is, and then you just wind it a little bit to get it to the exact phase of the moon. So, and of course there's all kinds of moon phase trackers out there, but the one that's easiest to use for me is the Watchville app, because it just shows it. And so it's really easy to kind of see what the phase of the moon is. But, I just really just love this piece quite a lot. So that's why I chose it. And then the fun part about this, and don't change the slide yet, because I want to backstory. So one of the things that I like about Time for a Pint is that I've met a lot of really cool people there. Just like at Redbar, there's a lot of people that share this specific hobby or obsession, however you'd like to call it. But the first time I went to Time for a Pint, I met Lee, who is 1 Hour Watch. It's 1 Hour Watch, yeah, on Instagram. And he had this stack of these little illustrations of watches that he does. And I was fascinated. I spent like an hour sitting there going through all of them. And after that, I was talking to Adam about it, and he commissioned Lee to actually draw a version of this watch. You can go to the next slide, with, instead of the moon itself, with the Death Star. So, you know, the joke, that's no moon kind of joke, came to life with this illustration, and I really love it. So so I thought, you know, because I love this watch so much, and I also have this really cool illustration from a fellow Time for a Pint attendee, that's why I chose this watch today.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
That's awesome. I've seen this quite a few times, and I wasn't aware of that kind of quick set thing on the back. That's really clever, actually.
Yeah, it's really, you know, that's the thing. I think a lot of people, when they have like perpetual calendars or moon phase complications, you know, there's not a quick set function. And so, so sometimes people don't bother to set it. And I think, you know, they had to really, they really thought it through very carefully when they created something like this, that's where the moon phase is just the star of the show.
Yeah.
You know, being able to set it very quickly and correctly is, you know, pretty important.
Yeah, it is really, really cool. Lee is hopefully going to be joining us next week as a panelist, depending on his internet connectivity, because he was supposed to join us today and come along and watch, but he messaged me about 2 hours ago and said, my internet is done. So hopefully we'll see him next week or the week after, and he'll be able to show us some more of his great drawings, because his style is amazing, and his level of talent is just off the level. It's so good.
Yeah, and a really nice guy too. You know, he's
super
just
nice
guy.
Yeah. So should we go on to the next watch? Any more questions from the panel before we do, or next one?
No question.
Okay. So this is Balázs's watch. You ready?
That's
for the next
me.
slide?
I was born ready. Yeah. Yeah, this is a bit different than the Arnold and Son. A lot different, actually. I mean, it's still a watch, right? It has hands and everything, but other than that, it's completely different era and different purpose. Everybody that knows me knows that I'm a fan of Angelus watches, and I think I've brought this one or maybe another one to the get-togethers in the past. But Chris, you definitely remember, and you've seen these. And I think Jonas, I don't know if he's here, but he had one, something along the line. So he had one of these anyways. So this is, I think vintage guys or fans of vintage chronographs know about this watch. This is an Angelus chronograph with the 215 movement. It's an in-house movement from Angelus that they made from the 30s up until the 50s. And this one is the, it's a bigger version. They made it in small cases and bigger cases, 35 millimeter and 38 millimeter steel cases. And this is the 38 millimeter version. This is just a watch that the company made just, you know, for normal commercial purposes. But then the whole 215 line, this big case, dark or black dial line, found its way to the Hungarian Airforce and then later to the military. So they used these watches first I think the Air Force and then other branches of the military. So a lot of them were coming from Hungary. You could find them a few years ago, and even today you can find them coming from Hungary. And me being Hungarian originally, this is something that that was very interesting to me when I first learned about it. And a good friend of mine had this one for sale, and I think about 5 years ago, I really fell in love with it, and I bought the watch, and that kind of triggered my interest with Angelus, the whole brand. And well, actually, thinking about it, Angelus is connected to Arnold and Son in a way. Now that I think about it, so basically, Angelus went bankrupt and obviously defunct, just like I guess Arnold and Son back in the day. I'm not sure about Arnold and Son's history. And then the same company that resurrected Arnold and Son a few years later resurrected Angelus with the help of our friend Sebastian Schalmontin from.
I was just going to say that he was the movement designer of the watch that I
exactly.
wrote a book.
And he's a massive chrono guy.
Massive
Yes.
guy, and wrote a book about it. Yeah. So,
He would be a great guest.
And I think he also wrote this book.
yeah,
That's the one. That's a really good book.
Yeah.
We should put that in the show notes, Chris.
Yeah, so he's a friend of ours, and he's a great guy, and he's also an Angelus collector. So he kind of, so they brought the brand and resurrected Angelus, but obviously that's a bit different than what it used to be. This is what it used to be, and I've been in touch with him and a few other guys since then, and we kind of share information and try to gather as much as possible about the brand and about special pieces like this one or the Chronodato and various other models. So this was, I think, one of the first watches that I brought to my first get together. So I thought this is the one that I'm gonna bring to you guys today. So that's my little military. And you don't see the back. Actually, I forgot to send a picture of the back, and I'm gonna just show it in the camera. I know you don't like it, but the Airforce watches had an inscription in the back, an L and an E, which stood for you probably won't see anything, which stood for Airforce. Now you can see it. So so Airforce watches had it, other watches didn't, and that's the that's how you can distinguish between the certain military branches.
Very cool. So there's a couple of questions on the chat about it. One is there loom on the dial?
No, this one doesn't. There was obviously radium. This one doesn't have it anymore. I got it like this. It was cleaned off. I have another one with a different dial design. That one still has the radium on it. But it came, you had the dial printed, you had the outline of the numbers, and then they would fill that outline up with radium back in the day. And the hands, I think they still have radium in them. You can see them. It's a bit of a flaking in the minute hand, but the other one that I have, that still has it. So yeah, it used to be radium.
Very cool. Any questions from the panel?
Well, there's a question, I think, about the date. So what was this, 1950s, this watch?
So this watch, it's hard to tell because as Angelus went bankrupt, there's no archives left. But judging by the inscriptions on many other military pieces, you can think that these watches were made probably around the late 40s, and then they were unsold, and hence the military could buy them in a huge bulk, bring them to Hungary, inscribe them. So they were probably mid to late 40s, but they were the military started to issue them in the early 50s, so 51, right. 52, around that time. But the 215 caliber is an old design. It's from the 30s, the mid 30s or so. In some cases, you can open the case back and take off the bridge, and underneath the bridge, there's an inscription of, I think, 3 or 4 numbers on the base plate, and that's the production, at least of the movement, as far as we know. But as I said, if anybody knows anything, let me know, because I have no information closer than that, sadly.
Very cool. Should we move on to the next watch?
Yeah, there is a question in the chat about when like radium should have stopped being used. I did, and a question about if I gave a talk on this. I did give a talk on it at the Horological Society of New York, which if you have some spare time, all of their past lectures are online for free, so you can watch those. But yeah, one would think that radium use would have stopped around the late 50s, but I have seen examples of watches that were made into the 60s that still have radium on them, even though radium, obviously, people started using tritium that was slightly less dangerous than radium. Well, it's a lot less dangerous, but still, the industry didn't completely step away from it until late 60s in some cases.
Yeah, this is way before that. This is, I would say, mid to late 40s, definitely. So within the time frame of.
And there's one more question about this from Stuart, which is, were military issued watches sold to personnel, or did they only get them if they were issued?
So this watch was, as I said, this was not commissioned, so anybody could buy this watch in Switzerland or whatever. And then what we think is that around the late 40s, these watches were kind of 15, as we said, the 215 was an old caliber, so Angelus was coming out with new calibers, so they kind of discontinued this one and they wanted to clear out the shelves. And so the military, or the Air Force first, and then the other branches of the military bought these watches, brought them to Hungary, inscribed them, and gave them out to pilots first, and then cartographers, and then other people. But they were actually made for for the market, so everybody and anybody could buy them back in the day. They were not commissioned by the Air Force. They were just private pieces that they bought, they inscribed, or they didn't inscribe in certain cases, and then just gave them out to their personnel.
Very cool. Okay, so I think on to the next watch, which is Matt's.
So thanks, Chris. This is I'm going to talk about a Bremont, and that'll probably divide opinion, but it's actually quite an interesting watch, and it's got an interesting connection to a couple of things for me personally. One of them was actually, it was a watch I took to the first Redbar meeting in London about 5 years ago, I guess. And secondly, ATG stands for well, ATG Vintage Watches, which is a forum that I joined back in 2007, 2008, and was instrumental in kind of feeding my nerdery. So it's got a few memories. Chris, if you can click over to the first picture. So back in 2008, when Bremont started selling their first watches, there was a line called the BCS2. This was a 43mm kind of aviator style watch, as you can see from the dial, the kind of stainless steel triptych case that they use. But ATG, Alistair over at ATG, had already had a successful limited edition with them, based on the MB Martin Baker watch. And a few of us got talking and thought we could do something with this. So he took this design, worked with Mick and Giles at Bremont, and produced this S2 Special, which is the next slide, hopefully. So left the dial alone, but changed the handset. So it's got rid of the stainless steel, DLC'd the case and crown, but kept a stainless steel case back. The idea was to kind of, because it could have been pulled from a cockpit or something, and it's resting on a clock that I'll show you in a few slides on. Can we have the next slide? One of the things that kind of drew me to Bremont in the first place wasn't actually so much the story, but it's how they feel on the wrist. They're quite big. They're 43mm and probably about 13.5, 14 tall in most cases. But this triptych case I've always found to be really interesting. I think the lugs, actually this slide and the next one maybe has the lugs a bit better. Yeah, I don't know if you can just see that curve. For me, that curve's always been really cool. There's something about the way that it kind of feels on the wrist. Lots of other watches I've worn are really kind of sharp and spiky and get caught on things. But I've always really liked this case design. Anyway, next slide. This is the ATG S2 Special, limited numbers. So probably one of the rarest of the limited editions. Obviously, Martin Baker watches and many others have been sold to the military and loads of military units. But this was 2012, 2013 when it was designed. So kind of the beginning of some of that. So it's quite a cool thing. There were meant to be 15. I've got number 12. I'm not quite sure how many there are, but maybe we can ask Alistair sometime. Next slide. Again, so I'm going to get onto a bit that I kind of wish we could have changed in a way. As you can see, the numerals on the clock, the cockpit clock in the background at 7, and the yellow, that's kind of been echoed through the dial. And I think Bremont been pretty good in getting that kind of aviator style through. If you just flick onto the next slide, I quite like the fact that the 12 is the only one in this Smith's Mark IID cockpit clock from a Typhoon. In this instance, you can just see that 12, great puffy radium loom. Don't want to take the dial off this one, definitely. Well, I mean, you do want to take the dial off it, but you just don't want to lick it, sniff it, or whatever. But I must admit, I do take the dial off occasionally to take photos. Next slide. And there it is, that nice 12. Probably the probably would have been luminescent back in the day, and the other numerals wouldn't have been. So again, that kind of focus, a bit like dive watches, you know, where you've got that pip at 12, nice bit of focus to. Next slide. Is that at the end? Oh yeah. Oh, more clock. Well, you know, obviously I'm the watch nerd, but I've got a clock nerd account as well. So obviously I take photos of clocks. This is a Smith's Mark 2D clock issued to the Air Ministry, so it's post World War II, typhoon kind of thing. Those cathedral-y kind of hands. That's probably it, really. Oh, you just scrolled to it, mate.
I have, but you know. Yeah, that's really cool. So, was the kind of the acquisition of this the way that Bremont do military watches now, in that you go to them you went to them as a fairly small group with an idea, and they made some changes for you?
Yeah, the first one of them was the Martin Baker MB 1.5, which took the Martin Baker watch, the MB2, took the handset from the MB1, the one you can only get if you punch out of a fast jet. Did a couple of other changes, put a new case back on it, and called it a limited edition. I guess it was probably the first of the non-military limited editions that Bremont did. I think ATG were actually the first online seller of Bremonts in the country as well. So there's been a relationship there for some time.
Very cool. Any questions from the panel? Any questions in the chat? Silence. We're losing someone to their dinner with their family. Goodbye, Jose. The recording will be up on YouTube, so you can watch this later. So go enjoy your dinner with your family. Anything from any of the panelists? Any questions at all? No? Okay. Thank you, Matt. Really cool. So moving on to my watch as the last one. As many of you know, I am predominantly an Omega collector, and when the couple of the main episode that I did at the podcast a while back with Jonas interviewing me was talking about 6 Omegas that make up the core of the watches that I collect. And this is one of them. This is the Speedmaster X-33, which is a titanium watch made in the late 80s, early 2000s. Following on from last week's show where we got really into boxes, I thought I'd take some pictures of the box to start with, because it's quite cool. I see Matt with his head in his hands. That is the appropriate response. So I'm not going to spend long talking about the box, but just a little bit of time. You need to indulge me. Thank you, Kevin. It is a great box. No, James, I will not be setting the alarm off in the house. That's not happening. So this is the box that the X-33 came in. This is kind of cool. It's a Kevlar kind of astronaut-y material fabric. The outer boxes are a bit different as well. So at this time, if you've been and bought a normal Speedmaster, the Omega logo was black. I think as these were the Mars watches, the logos were red. It has a great big instruction booklet with a spiral bound kind of thing and pull out bits. There is a lot going on with this watch, and if you don't have the instructions, it's incredibly hard to make it work. Look at that box. I mean, come on. Who couldn't love that box? Matt, how do you feel about this box? No? Muted yourself.
That's how much he likes the box.
He likes...
What is that? But Matt, you're muted.
Matt, you're muted.
That is the book, the instruction book that comes with the X-33.
It's very, very similar. As someone is saying in the chat, it does look a bit like a spacesuit. I think that was the idea. And as Kevin has said, also, it's in good condition. They tend to fail. This is, I'm going to stop being nerdy about boxes in a moment. This is a second generation box. So the first generation X-33s had like a kind of a pit with a foam ball in, and you'd take the watch out. And if you open one of those now, it's just like shredded, like hamster bedding. These ones are a bit more robust, but you can see like the glue is starting to pull this thing apart. And this is what's inside. So I went outside and took this today. It is a 42.5 millimeter titanium case watch on a titanium bracelet. This is the second generation, so it makes a few improvements over the first generation. It has a brushed bezel. There is a lume pip at 12 instead of a red arrow. It has a different type of crown that's much easier to pull out. The first generation had a twisting crown, which when you don't really turn the crown to do anything was kind of a weird function. This one has got a knurling on it, so you can pull the crown out to get at some of the different menu options, and it's a push-pull function. there is a story that the first generation of these watches, the crowns collapsed because they weren't well made, and the kind of, I don't know if it's confirmed or unconfirmed rumor is something was changed in the structure of the case to allow this later type of crown, but who knows. These were developed in association with NASA and General Tom Stafford. It turns out, I didn't know this, Fratello Watches have done another post on the X-33 today where Rob and Robert Yan are talking about it. So head to Fratello Watches and have a look. There's loads of stuff on there about it. This is a watch I really, really wanted when it was new. And I talked about this on the podcast. I had a choice as a 21st birthday present, and I was confronted with a traditional Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch and this in the cabinet next to each other. And I chose the Moonwatch, and I've been digging through stuff in the house and found the original brochure and the original price list from 2002 when this was bought. And in 2002, this watch was £1,875, and Speedmaster Pro was £1,395 on a bracelet. So these were like considerably more expensive. This was sort of interesting, high tech. It's got chronograph functions, mission timer, UTC time. There is a lot going on there. On the back, and this might be one of my favorite bits about this, but the back has got flight qualified by NASA for space missions. And you can see that the case back is slightly hollow to allow for the alarm to work, which again, I am not going to be turning on in the house because it will get me in trouble. And it also illuminates. So someone has mentioned this in the chat. The whole thing lights up. You push down the pusher at 10 o'clock and it freezes the second hand and the dial lights up. And then when the light has gone back off, the second hand catches up, and that's done to save power. Stanley is asking, does the alarm work underwater? I have no idea. I'm not going to try and find out. Also, Phil is saying need to sync the analog and digi-seconds hands. That is about as close as you can get it. They don't line up any better than that. I tried before I took the picture, and that's as good as it gets. So this is the watch I brought along today. Any questions from the panel about this nerdy piece of expensive Casio G-Shock alike from the Swiss?
No, but that's a really good description of it.
That's pretty much it.
I really like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I mean, the bezel looks like it's easy to operate. The pushes are always great on these things. It's good that the crown was improved. And I think the design's lovely. I mean, the way they've kept those twisted lugs as well. I mean, for a digital watch, it's pretty cool.
Because Alex changed his suggestion on the chat. Can you please do an impression of the alarm?
No.
Please?
Nope. Loud noises, repetitive loud noises that I can't turn off because I can't find the instruction manual. That's the sort of experience.
I nicked your book.
The question, so a couple of questions. Why is the alarm so loud from Nick? As I understand it, it's so that it can be heard over the background noise in the space shuttle and later on the ISS. So I think there is quite, as far as I understand, the background noise is quite high. So the alarm on this is somewhere over 100 decibels. It is loud.
It's kind of weird, given no one can hear you scream in space.
There's a question from, there's lots of questions now. You need to slow down, everybody. Does the alarm work underwater? Don't know, not going to find out. It's got 30 meters of water resistance. The battery was changed about 18 months ago, so it passed the water resistance test then, but I'm not taking this thing swimming. Hervé asked how long the batteries last. It's about 2 years. It's a little bit longer if you turn off the digital display, which is how I keep this most of the time when I'm not wearing it. There is a low battery indicator, and the way that works is it gets to 10 seconds to the minute, and it starts to judder. So you know that the battery is about to die. What is the story about the caseback of the first generation? The caseback of a lot of the first generations are smooth, I think, and there is some sort of changeover between certified and qualified in the word.
I think it's in the Skywalker models, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's another thing on the Skywalker, which is the ESA logo.
Yeah.
There's some sort of weird gap of time between the first and second generation where some of them say certified and some of them say qualified.
Yeah.
And the wording that you're allowed to use on a NASA product is qualified.
Yeah. But that's not this one. It's the Skywalker one.
Yeah. Is it stupid expensive to service the watch? It isn't actually. It's £90 for a battery change, which includes a reseal, And the last time I did a full service was about £400. And that includes a new movement, a full set of new pushers, a new crown, a full set of hands, a battery, full set of seals. So it's pretty involved. Yeah, I mean, this is the second one of these that I owned. I owned a first generation and didn't quite like it as much as the second. So when the opportunity to have this one came up, I moved on the first generation really quickly and got this second generation. There's questions about Lemania. I don't know what the questions are.
Sorry, Chris. That was that's the second hand with the little plane thing, which is also on the bezel. Lemania 5100 powered chronos used to have that as a second hand. We were just saying, given it's a Swatch Group watch, it's not surprising they stole it from that.
Yeah. Stanley has asked, what was wrong with the movement before? I'm not sure what that means. I mean, the service of this is they just swap the movement, and as I understand it, they take away the old movement and reservice them. There's a question about, is it a super quartz movement temperature adjusted? As I understand it, the batch D of these movements are, but it's very hard to know what movement is in your watch unless it's been serviced and it has one of the batch Ds. To answer your question about the first gen, Kevin, I just didn't like the shiny bits. I much preferred the matte parts, and I liked the later crown. I think this watch feels a little bit more stealthy than the first generation. Yeah. So I feel I've answered a lot of questions about the X33 very, very quickly. This is going to be the last question, and then we're not going to talk about this watch anymore. Joe, I would buy it again. I love this watch. This isn't going anywhere. I would quite like a Skywalker, but I'm not going to pay the prices that get asked for them. So we have got, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and go back to video. And hi, everybody, that's better. We have got 5 minutes left. So does anyone have anything they wanted to cover? I know Kathleen had something she wanted to say about an upcoming online event.
So one of the things I wanted to, and I'm going to tell you about something that I like, and then turn a question to the rest of the panelists. So I know we've all kind of been missing, our in-person get-togethers and talking about watches with other, like I said, fellow obsessed people. But I think what I'd like to hear from all of you is what other things online have you seen that you're enjoying very much? And I wanted to mention Worn and Wound have been doing a series of Instagram live sessions with all of the exhibitors that would have been at their San Francisco edition of Wind Up. I really think it's very enjoyable. They're chatting one-on-one with all the brands, which are mostly micro brands, with the exception of a couple like Oris. But it's really great, and they're able to talk about their brand and show their products and stuff, and still be able to kind of stay connected while we're all stuck inside. So to the rest of you guys, are there any things like that you've seen going on online that you're enjoying in the watches or not, but preferably watches?
Who wants to go first? Me? Okay, me. I've been enjoying, there's been quite a lot of Instagram lives happening for various different things. I saw the Redbar one. I saw part of the Open Oscar one. I caught a really fun one on Friday night between a friend of mine, James Sleater, who runs a tailor on Savile Row called Cad and the Dandy, where he was doing, I think it can only really be described as a drunk cast between him and a guy called Aaron Cross, who's based in the north of England and does some sort of amazing graphics and marketing stuff. I get the impression they've been drinking all afternoon before turning the cameras on, and it was an insight into Savile Row tailoring and their relationship. So, this, I think as more and more of us get bored, we're going to see more and more fun things happening, hopefully. And my fingers crossed they don't stop when we all are allowed back outside again. Anyone else?
Yeah, I will add to that we had our first Redbar Instagram Live, and it was myself and Adam Craniotis, and I would definitely describe that as a drunk. It was Adam showed up in his pants and and he switched from drinking wine in a glass to wine from the bottle directly. But it was a good laugh. I mean, everybody. It was it was wildly.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's probably the only thing Adam could get away with. So it's
yeah, really, and anybody else, they wouldn't have thought it was funny, but just his personality sort of led that. Yeah.
I'm sure there are lots of other watch ones. I mean, Dinky's doing some fantastic stuff as only they can. A couple have caught my eye that are non-watch related. One is the guy from The Office, John Krasinski. Can't pronounce his surname. He's doing this good news. This is like a news show which only has good news, and he's just had Carol on from The Office as well as a kind of what do you call it? Re-thingy, and it was brilliant. It was really touching, and those kind of things are cool too, not just watches.
Yeah.
And online whiskey tastings as well. I've been doing a couple of those.
Oh, invite me to that next time.
Yeah, I'll have to get you involved. The London Whiskey Club. I shall send you the details.
We had a question in advance actually from Richard Stenning, who is at Frodshams, the people that have made that super interesting. I'm going to get this wrong, but is it a double impulse chronometer?
Double impulse chronometer.
Yes, got it right. So he asked the question, what factors do you consider classify someone or a company as a modern independent watchmaker? Who wants to have a go at that one? Is that Kathleen being nominated?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you just repeat that again? Because it's an interesting question, and it's worded in a way that makes it hard for me to answer, I think. But
same. I've read it several times and I'm confused. So what does it take for someone to be classed as an independent watchmaker right now? Like,
I mean, I guess the basic definition would be that they're not owned by a big conglomerate.
Right.
I mean, when I say micro brands, which a lot of micro brands don't like, those are independent for the most part. Most of those brands are independent, and they're just like owned and operated by one or two people, up to larger independents like Kari Voutilainen or the Gronefelds or whatever that have a number of people working for them. I would just say, for all intents and purposes, for me, it's that they're not owned by a larger company. So I wouldn't consider Arnold Son independent because they're owned and operated by Citizen. So, but a brand like Oris is clearly independent, even though they're not like in the same category as like the high end kind of hand kind of independence, but they're an independent company.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. I mean, as long as you're not kind of owned by someone else, you're independent, right? And the size of your business doesn't really make all that much difference. Yeah. I suppose there's the other line of questioning about where do your movements come from, which is a whole different kind of conversation. And
but then independents sometimes don't have movements by themselves, right? Like
exactly,
even the high-end independents don't make their own movements. So in this sense, as Kathleen said, it's pretty much the same. Do you get MBNF, or if you look at Junghans?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's more kind of spirit of independence than anything else. I mean, I wouldn't have had Oris in that box, because I think the word independent has been used to describe people like Kari and others for such a long time. It was not used to describe Oris at the same time. So I don't think I would have them as an independent. Because independents tend not to be quite so mass market. They tend to be focused on slightly more esoteric things in a way, slightly more focused on the watchmaking than the marketing and other things that most modern watch brands are focused on. So I would say probably I would have Arnold Son actually in as an independent, even though they are that whole Legibere Citizen kind of corporation, simply because they embody the spirit of independence. They come up with interesting ways of doing things, as you've shown with your watch, and they embody that spirit of independence, perhaps in a way that some of the other non-conglomerate brands might not.
It feels like this is a conversation that could like sink several bottles of whiskey over a long evening, doesn't it? Like as you go back and forth. It's like, what about these guys? Are they independent? But yeah, it's kind of I can see both sides of it. Like I get Matt's point of there are some independent brands. Someone in the chat has mentioned Rolex, who, you know, theoretically they're independent. Theoretically they're a charity, right? But, you know, tax reasons. You know, there's it's kind of how you class yourself. And someone else has mentioned you need to define the term. So I suppose it's kind of like the sort of craftsman level independents almost, who are making tiny quantities, and then there are the bigger independents who just aren't owned by anybody else and they're off doing their own thing. So maybe a bit of a kind of a different set in there. There is a question about, would you be surprised to see a watch manufacturer suffer or fail as a result of coronavirus, from Joe?
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
No, I wouldn't be surprised either. And that's a concern I have. And I think this is one of the things that I really like. What I have seen is the community, not just of watch collectors, but the community of makers, of the community of creators, and, you know, not just independents, but smaller brands and things coming together to support each other. Because I think, you know, this is a difficult time, especially for, you know, conversely from the independence conversation, with the exception of someone like Rolex or even Oris, who have a lot of resources and a pretty strong business. You know, some of these smaller brands might not have a ton of, you know, capital or, you know, cash on hand. I don't know
Exactly.
But the point is that depending on how long this goes, whether people feel comfortable buying things again immediately, you know, once we get back to whatever normal is going to be, you know, it could be very financially difficult for a lot of companies, not just in the watch world, but kind of everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that whatever happens next is going to be a bit different from what came before, right? I think that's not going to shock any of us.
Right.
But I suppose there is an argument now, if you have the means and the ability and you're financially stable and you'd like to support an independent and one of the smaller companies, and you had your eye on one of their watches, now might be a nice time to go talk to them and maybe pick one up.
So I've been the Watchnerd. He's been the jittery guy in the corner. We've had Kathleen from Redbar Group and Balázs from Fratello. Thank you everyone for joining us. Until next week, have fun. Stay safe.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.